At my own birthday dinner, my mother leaned across the table, smiling like a queen giving orders. "While everyone's here," she whispered to my dad, "tell your son to go change the locks at her apartment." The clinking fork stopped. My brother didn't question, just stood up and left like it was normal to break into your sister's life on her birthday. For an hour, laughter turned into whispers. Then he came back pale as the tablecloth shaking. "Mom, there's something," he said. Her smile vanished. My stomach dropped. Whatever he saw at my apartment wasn't supposed to be found. When people talk about family, they picture warmth. Birthday candles, laughter, hugs that mean something. Mine always looked the part. Perfect smiles and Christmas photos, matching sweaters, polite small talk about vacations and promotions. But behind that, everything was a performance. My mother, Mrs. Reeves, was the director. My father, her silent investor, and my brother Nathan, the star of every act. Since I was little, I knew my role. Stay quiet. Don't ruin the image. If Nathan forgot to call, Mom said he's busy. If I missed one dinner, she said, "You're selfish." Somehow, every flaw became mine. I used to think if I worked harder, achieved more, maybe she'd finally look at me the way she looked at him. But control doesn't stop when you start succeeding. It just changes form. That night at the restaurant, her whisper wasn't random. She had planned it. I could see it in the way she arranged the seating, Nathan next to Dad, me opposite, like an audience member. Even the cake had his favorite flavor, not mine. And when she said, "While everyone's here," she wasn't just talking about convenience. She wanted witnesses. She wanted power. Dad didn't question her either. He never did. Decades of keeping peace had turned him into an echo. He muttered, "Do it after dessert," like it was a grocery list. My brother nodded, eager to please, eager to obey. I remember tracing my finger along the rim of my glass, pretending not to hear, pretending not to care. But inside, my chest burned. Change the locks at my apartment. Why? What had I done this time? I had my own place for 3 years, a small apartment in Portland where I lived with my son Liam. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, my safe place. No one had a key except me. Or so I thought. When Nathan left the table, I stayed still. Mom chatted with relatives, her voice sweet again, as if she hadn't just ordered a break-in. My father smiled weakly, swirling his wine, pretending not to notice my silence. I excused myself to the restroom just to breathe. The mirror reflected a calm woman, neat hair, lipstick intact. No one could see the storm behind her eyes. By the time I returned, an hour had passed. Nathan was back, pale and shaking. He leaned toward Mom, his voice cracking. "There's something you need to see." Her expression stiffened. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, eyes darting to me. "There's police tape around her door." The table fell silent. My mother's fork slipped from her hand. I didn't move, didn't blink, because in that moment, I realized the real dinner hadn't even started yet. The drive home felt endless. Street lights flashed over the windshield like heartbeat monitors, steady but cold. My phone buzzed nonstop, Mom, Dad, even Nathan, but I didn't answer. The city outside looked normal, but I could feel something shifting, something that wouldn't go back to the way it was. When I pulled into my apartment complex, 2 police cruisers were parked near the entrance. Blue and red lights pulsed against the brick walls. My stomach twisted. I barely remember getting out of the car, just the sound of gravel under my heels, and a uniformed officer stepping toward me. "Ms. Reeves," he asked. "I'm Officer Grant. Are you the tenant of Unit 214? Yes. What's going on?" He checked his notes. "We received a report of a break-in. Your door was forced open, but nothing appears to be stolen. We've sealed it for investigation." I blinked, trying to process. "A break-in? Who would?" He paused. "Do you know anyone who might have a copy of your keys?" My throat tightened. "My brother Nathan Reeves?" The officer glanced up sharply. "And why would your brother have your keys?" I hesitated. "Because my mother told him to." He stared at me for a moment, pen hovering. "Told him to do what? Change my locks." He exhaled through his nose, writing something down. "That's quite an instruction." "I didn't give permission," I said quietly. He nodded. "We'll review the building footage. You should stay with someone tonight." But I didn't move. I couldn't, because through the cracked door I could see my living room. Nothing was destroyed, nothing missing, except the feeling of safety. And then I saw it. The photos of me and Liam on the wall had been turned face down, one by one. "Officer," I whispered, "those photos." He stepped closer, flashlight sweeping the room. On the coffee table lay a single white envelope. He handed me gloves. "You should open it." Inside was a short printed message. "Tell your mother the truth always finds its way home." My fingers trembled. Grant frowned. "Does that mean anything to you?" I shook my head, but my heart knew better. The words weren't for me, they were a warning to her. Somewhere between that restaurant and this moment, the control my mother built was cracking. She just didn't know it yet. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the envelope again, those printed words staring back at me like a dare. By morning, the rain hadn't stopped. It hit the windows in hard, uneven bursts, the kind that makes silence feel louder. When my phone rang, I thought it was Mom. It wasn't. "Ms. Reeves, this is Officer Grant." His voice was steady, professional. "We traced a payment made to a man named Thomas Hale, the building's maintenance assistant. It came from a bank account under your mother's name." For a second, I didn't breathe. "You're sure?" Completely. The note and the timing line up. "We believe your mother may have hired him to retrieve something from your apartment." Retrieve what I asked, though I already knew. Grant hesitated. "That's what we're trying to determine. I suggest you speak to her directly but carefully." After the call, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still in my hand, pulse pounding. Hired a man. My mother, who preached about reputation and trust, had committed a crime to invade my life. I remembered the box in my closet, the one labeled Dad's business papers. I had found it last month while cleaning. Inside were property deeds, statements, wire transfers, documents signed with my name. I thought it was an accident, a clerical mix-up, but now I understood. Those weren't mistakes. They were camouflage. By late afternoon, I'd made up my mind. I texted her dinner, my place. 7 p.m., no games this time. Her reply came instantly. "Fine, but be ready for the truth." When 7 came, the knock was light, deliberate, just like her. My mother stepped in, perfume and confidence filling the room. "You shouldn't have involved the police," she said. I crossed my arms. "You shouldn't have hired a man to break into my home." Her lips tightened. "You don't understand what's happening. Then explain it." She glanced around, eyes lingering on the flipped photos. "Those papers you found your father's business isn't simple. Thomas was supposed to retrieve them quietly before you did something reckless." I laughed softly. "You mean before I found out you've been using my name to hide your fraud?" Her face hardened. "Watch your tone, Evelyn." But this time, I didn't lower my voice. "No, Mom. Watch yours." Thunder rolled outside like the sky had been waiting for her to show up. Rain streaked across the window, sliding down in crooked lines that caught the light from the street lamps. My mother stood in the middle of my living room, perfectly still, perfectly put together, heels polished pearls glowing against her black coat. If guilt had a dress code, she'd nailed it. "I was protecting you," she said, voice calm, almost gentle. I tilted my head. "By breaking into my home—" "You don't understand," she said, pacing. "Your father's business has complications, partnerships that can't be made public. If those papers were discovered, it would ruin us." "Us?" I asked. "Or just you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't twist this. Everything your father and I have done was to secure this family's future." I almost laughed. "You used my name, Mom. You forged my signature on property deeds and transfer forms. You didn't secure the future, you stole it." Her voice rose, breaking through the hum of the storm. "You think you're some kind of victim. Everything we have you benefited from, college tuition, your first car, that apartment. Do you think those things just appeared? I paid for that apartment myself. I said every word sharp and measured. You just couldn't stand that something had my name on it, without your fingerprints all over it." For the first time, her expression flickered. It wasn't guilt. It was fear. Fear of losing control. She turned toward the window, hiding it. "Evelyn, listen to me carefully. If those documents go public, your father could face prison time." I folded my arms. "Maybe he should." She spun back around. "You wouldn't dare." "I already did," I said softly. "Officer Grant has them." Her face drained of color. "What?" "You wanted the truth out of my house. I delivered it to the police. Lightning flashed across the glass, bright enough to cut her silhouette in half. For a moment, she didn't look like my mother anymore, just a woman cornered by her own lies. "You're destroying your family," she whispered. I stepped closer. "No, Mom. You did that the moment you used me as your shield." She shook her head, stepping back as if I'd struck her. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I do," I said. "I'm setting boundaries. Something you never taught me how to do." The air between us thickened. Every word, every silence, every wound we'd both ignored was suddenly there, alive, breathing. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but rage. "You think you're strong because you've got the law on your side. You're naive. The world doesn't care about your little revenge." I looked at her steadily. "It's not revenge, Mom. It's accountability." She laughed, cold and brittle. "You'll regret this." Maybe I said, but at least it'll be my regret. The room went quiet except for the rain. Somewhere outside, a car horn echoed, distant and hollow. She stood there, chest rising and falling fast like she was about to lunge or cry or both. Finally, she said it. "If you go through with this, you'll never have a family again." I met her gaze. "Then maybe it's time I build one worth having." She froze. Her face hardened, mask sliding back into place. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. The click of her heels against the hardwood was the sound of a legacy breaking apart. Before she reached the handle, I said, "One more thing." She stopped, didn't turn. "You asked why someone flipped the photos in my apartment," I said. "Maybe because even strangers can tell which way is right side up." Her hand trembled just once before she pulled the door open and disappeared into the storm. The sound of thunder followed her out. For a long time, I stood there watching the door sway slightly from the draft. My hands shook not from fear, but from release. I walked to the table where the envelope still lay. I picked it up, tore it in half, then dropped it into the trash. This time, silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like ownership. The next morning, I met Officer Grant at the station. My hair was still damp, the air outside heavy with leftover rain. He greeted me with a small nod. "You're sure about this?" "I'm done covering for them," I said. He slid a folder toward me. Inside were photos of the documents, copies of the bank statements, and confirmation that my parents' assets were being frozen pending investigation. "Once this goes to the Financial Crimes Division," he said, "they'll open a full case. You'll be cleared of all liability." I exhaled slowly. "Good." He hesitated. "You know this will make headlines." "I know," I said, "but at least they'll be true." By the time I left the precinct, the clouds had started to break apart. Sunlight spilled through in thin, uneven rays, the kind that look hesitant, like they're not sure they belong yet. When I got to the hospital to pick up Liam, he was waiting with a sticker on his shirt, a gold star. He ran straight into my arms. "Mom, look, I got a star for being brave." I smiled. "So did I, sweetheart. You just can't see mine yet." He giggled, not understanding, and for once I didn't need him to. We drove home in silence, his little hand resting on my arm. The world outside smelled clean, washed new. When we got back, I made pancakes, the kind he liked with too much syrup and not enough patience. He talked about school, his friends, how he wanted to build a rocket in the backyard. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something was chasing me. There were still calls I hadn't returned, messages from reporters I didn't plan to answer. Let them talk. The truth didn't need my permission anymore. That night after Liam went to bed, I stood by the window again. The city lights blinked in the distance, reflected in the rain still clinging to the glass. I thought about my parents, not with anger this time, but clarity. They taught me the difference between love and control, between loyalty and silence. And somewhere between their lies and my truth, I'd finally found myself. The next morning, I walked into the post office with one final envelope in my hand. Inside were the remaining documents linking my parents' offshore accounts. No note, no message, just the truth. When I sealed it, I whispered, "This ends here." Outside, the air was bright, cool, honest. I turned toward the street where my car waited, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt since childhood: peace. News travels fast when scandal smells like money. Within a week, every local outlet had picked up the story. Prominent couple under federal review for identity fraud. My phone lit up nonstop. Journalists, lawyers, relatives pretending to check in. I didn't answer a single one. The world could speculate all it wanted. I was done explaining myself. The apartment was quiet now. The flipped photos had been rehung, every frame straightened. Liam's laughter filled the space where fear used to echo. Sometimes late at night, I still caught myself expecting the phone to ring with her name on it. But it never did. Not out of guilt, out of shame. Dad resigned from his company the same day the investigation became public. The firm released a one-line statement about health reasons. Mom vanished from her social circles, her charity events, her book club. For a woman who lived off appearances, silence was the only punishment that fit. Officer Grant called a few days later. "You've been fully cleared, Ms. Reeves. The case is moving forward." "Thank you," I said, "for believing me." He paused. "You didn't need me to believe you. You just needed to believe yourself." After we hung up, I looked around my living room, the same one that had been invaded, violated, reclaimed. The air felt lighter, like the space itself was breathing again. I poured a cup of coffee and opened the window. Outside, the city sounded alive. Horn's footsteps, the soft hum of a place that didn't care who you used to be. That weekend, I invited a few friends over for dinner, people who had stayed when everything fell apart. We didn't talk about my parents. We didn't have to. Nana raised her glass and said, "To freedom, and to never apologizing for protecting yourself." I smiled. "I'll drink to that." Later, after everyone left, I tucked Liam into bed. He mumbled, half asleep, "Are we safe now, Mom?" I brushed his hair back. "Yes, baby. We are." He sighed and drifted off, and for the first time in years, I didn't doubt the words that came out of my mouth. The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen window, soft and gold. Liam sat at the table, kicking his legs syrup on his cheek. I flipped pancakes, watching the light move across the floor like it was tracing new boundaries, ones that finally belonged to me. I'd spent years trying to keep the peace. Turns out, peace isn't something you keep. It's something you claim. As I poured coffee, I looked at my son and smiled. This time I said softly, "The locks stay mine." If you've ever had to rebuild yourself after family betrayal, share your story below and hit subscribe. You're not alone here.